Joy, 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 ever new joy, joy.
Well, thanks for taking the time.
Sure.
I want to know just a little bit about where you came from before being here. I know a lot of the things that you have done here, but what was your family like? How did that inspire you?
So I was raised first in Tennessee for 9 years, and then my dad moved to the suburb. My family moved because my dad's job moved to Chicago, and my mom was from Chicago, so we lived in the suburbs of Chicago. My dad worked for the Methodist Church, and my mom and dad were active members of their local church and raised us in that way. And, as typical, I became less interested in that particular church when I reached college age and was less involved, but they were always supportive and always guided my life by praying for me as I went through my life.
How many sibs did you have, if any?
I had one sister, 6 years younger,
Okay.
and so I left home, went to college in southern Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and left that after about a year and a half,
Okay.
and moved to Los Angeles, knowing no one
Huh.
except for one friend from high school, and lived there for a while. And I moved to San Francisco in the summer of 1967,
Huh.
the summer of love.
Yeah.
And I think Swami was there then, but I did not have the opportunity to meet him. It was the time of the Vietnam War, and I left college, which was a safety respite from the draft, but I just felt that was what I had to do. And so I did get called up, and so I registered as a conscientious objector to the war, and I served my country for 2 years working in alternative service, at first at Goodwill Industries in San Francisco, and I transferred to a surgical hospital in Boston for the majority of that time, where I lived. And when I completed that part of my life, went to Woodstock in 1969, and then decided to move on for something new. And typical story, got the autobiography of a yogi, and a few months later was at Ananda.
Wow. Great.
When I first arrived at Ananda, I had been backpacking around. I went first to Mount Washington to sign up for the lessons, and being as how I didn't have an address, they were reluctant to give them to me, but they gave me some and said, get an address. So I continued hitchhiking and went to Big Sur, and heard there was a Buddhist monastery way back in the mountains. So I walked there, and my first experience meditating was with Roshi Suzuki, the revered Japanese master who was the headmaster at the time. He wasn't, I think Dick Baker was the leader of the Zen Center, but Roshi Suzuki was the guru of the ashram. And someone said, I said, I like this a lot, but Yogananda is my guru. And, he's up in Grass Valley. So I said, well, he passed away. No, he's up in Grass Valley. He has a community there. You should go there. So I did, and arrived with my rucksack, and on a Saturday night and camped in the forest nearby and went to the Sunday service. That was the first time I saw Swami.
Wow.
And I didn't, I'd run out of money by then, so I wasn't able to stay at the retreat there. So I was recommended to camp on the river, and Swami, after the service, offered to give me a ride to there. He was heading back to the Bay Area to teach. He was teaching around the area to bring in the funds to support Ananda, and he gave me a ride down to drop me off at the camping area there, and I just was so impressed how natural he was. There was absolutely zero from him of wanting to impress me or to show me of, how great he was or how I should revere him. Or it was just, he's a little bit of a quirky personality, but delightful, full of humor. And he was one of the most totally naturally himself person that I'd met. I tend to be more like that. I just am who I am. And I just thought, I can follow this guy. And I did. And stuck with it.
Oh, great. So what happened from that point on?
From that point on, I developed a granola recipe, and someone started a distribution business, and so I got in on that, and they had 35 stores between Nevada City and Santa Cruz that, health food stores, bookshops, different gift shops, where they provided the incense, Swami's books, Benai's jewelry, the granola, Shivani and Mukti's candy bar business. So after a bit, I took over the route. So I would make granola for a week, and then I would distribute to all the stores, and then pick up oats and honey and grains for the granola on the way back, and did that for a couple of years. But that ended. When I started, there was 2 brands of granola. By the time I was done, there was 50 brands, all competing to underprice each other, and everybody had their own batch. So it was called Kali Oats. The recipe is still famous. We actually made it at the college for a few years and sold it at Briar Patch and Masters Market. So I went on the tree planting trip, the first one, in Happy Camp, and used the money. At that time, there were several families that bought gallons of raw milk from a farmer in near Nevada City, and he said he was we would have to find another source because he was gonna sell the cows. And the first time in my life, and only a couple of other times, I actually heard Master's voice say to me, "Buy those cows." I thought, well, I don't know how to do that, but buy those cows. And so I did, and got them, and developed it into a small dairy there, which provided milk, cheese, yogurt for the community and the market for a couple of decades almost. Can I tell the story now? There's an interesting story at that time when I was first starting the dairy. It was, at that time there was, Swami had started the monastery at Ayodhya. And the retreat had been the center of Ananda, the meditation retreat. And after a couple of years, in 1969, they acquired the main village, which we called the farm at that time. So there was the farm and the retreat and Ayodhya were the 3 locations. And it was interesting. There were many people that were there when I came in 1970 that were some of the people at the meditation retreat were very diligent in getting the retreat going, and Swami asked a number of people to join him at Ayodhya to have a monastery, and that was the monastery. And the families tended more to be at the village, and it was probably to be expected, but there was a certain amount of people that lived at the village that were a little bit rebellious of Swami's leadership. I don't completely understand why. It just was interesting, but I remember seeing Swami drive up into the village, and I went over to him and I said, Swami, I just want you to know that not everybody at the village, at the farm, is against you. You know, there's many that are. And he just looked at me with such great love and said, and thanked me so much. And he said, if there's ever any questions you have, don't hesitate to ask. And I said, yes. Oh, well, I do have one question. I said, I hear that you want to turn this into an ashram. And he kind of looked down, and I thought, oh, I blew it. But he looked up and he told me a brief summary of the story of the four ashrams of life. You know, I don't remember the names of them right now. My wife actually wrote a book about it called The Four Stages of Yoga. But he told me about, you know, the student and the householder and the sannyasi and the forest dweller as the phases of life. And he said that's what the ashram is. It's the four stages of life. And so, but he was so kind. But at that time, this was it was the early 70s, maybe 73 or something like that. And Swami had an opportunity to go to India for a period of a few months for seclusion, which he did. He had not been able to visit there for many years since he'd left before that. And so he was away. And so a couple of the fellows, Steve and Jim, that were wanting to sort of take more autonomy for the farm, decided to start the farm council. And so Jatish was living at the village, and by that time, actually Jaya and Sadhana Devi had first joined the monastery, but you know they were inspired by Master to be a householder couple for a phase of their life, and so they were living in the village. And Shivani was at the Ayodhya. So there was a committee started with Steve and Jim, and then Jaya, Jyotish, and Shivani. Shivani had been in college in Philadelphia studying to be a lawyer. So she was going to be a Philadelphia lawyer, which we always considered someone that was very clever with the law. And for some reason, I was never really part of the inner circle meeting group, just a regular trooper for the work. But I was able to join that group. I was living at the village, the farm. And so we had these meetings, and it was very interesting. It was partly a little bit tug of war about different things, having different agendas, but it also was very inspiring. You could almost feel, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams in the aura with us to create something of great import for the future of the world. And at the same time, it was the longest period of rain and overcast weather. There was 100 days without any sun that winter. And we had our meetings and it was gloomy and, all this. But by the time we finished making the proposal for the farm council to have ready when Swami came back, and I thought and it was all very written in language of declaration of whatever, Constitution. But Jatish insisted the last sentence of the declaration was, when all else fails, you does the best you can with what you got. Swami loved that, and he heard it. So it was all about making the farm sort of an autonomous thing. And so Swami came back from his seclusion and trip to India, and the meeting was had with all of Swami's retinue and all the ones that had been on the committee, and it was at Swami's dome at Ayodhya, and it was presented, and Swami said, "Oh, this is wonderful! We can have a village council, and there can be representatives from the retreat and the farm and Ayodhya, and everyone can participate." And it sort of popped the bubble of the ones that wanted to sort of take it away. It was all inclusive. It was brilliant. And you asked about an embarrassing moment. At the end of the meeting, it was time to go. Well, then the night before, I had been down at the dairy and trying to upgrade the milk parlor kitchen where we processed the milk, and as it turned out, I'd just basically been up all night trying to work on this, and hadn't really gotten any sleep, and I didn't take the opportunity to clean up very well before going to the meeting, but I didn't want to miss that meeting. It was quite a thing. And so as I was the first one to get up at the end of the meeting, and right when I was right in the middle of the room with everybody there, Swami just looked at me and said, you should clean up before you come to a meeting. It's not respectful. And, I can be sort of a fiery guy sometimes, but it was strange because I didn't react at all. I just looked Swami in the eye and accepted what he was saying and listened. And he just went on for a couple minutes, and I just felt wave after wave of blessings and love pouring onto me from Swami at that moment. And then he said, "Well, there you have it." So, wow. So I always remember to try to make sure I cleaned up at least a little bit before anything like that. That's a great story. Again. So. Yeah, and so that was how the beginning of the village council started. Huh. Wow. And for many years, the main communication of for the village, the community, was called the minutes. And so the village council would meet, and they would have a little written up sheet of a page, maybe a couple pages, that was the minutes of what was talked about. And that was now that's the Villager, which still continues in an online form primarily, but probably many of you are familiar with that. Right.
Well, the other things that I know you for are construction and college. So tell me about one of those, and then we'll talk about the other.
Well, I had moved to Oceansong in the early 80s, and I lived in Oceansong and also in the San Francisco house in San Francisco. for a period of time, and I worked in the tea company for a job, and that sort of ended, and I had always gone back to building. When I first started the dairy, of course, the dairy does not make enough to live on anywhere, but particularly when you have, we got up to a dozen cows. We had actually quite an operation with half a dozen staff. There's quite a lot of people that actually worked in the dairy then that are around, and the old timers. But I would always go to construction and to make supplemental income to get by. And so, and I'd studied architecture in college, so I had an affinity for that trade. So I went out east for a couple of years and worked. I had an opportunity to work for an architect, which I did, and didn't turn out what I thought. But I looked for a job to save up to come back to California, to Ananda, and got an opportunity which working for a major rental car company at Dulles International Airport. They were building a new multi-million-dollar facility. I got a job as a draftsman, and interestingly enough, there were 237 applicants. I got the job. I was the only applicant without a graduate degree in architecture, and I was the only applicant with construction on-site experience. So they wanted someone that actually knew what it was really like working on the job. And after about a week, something happened, and the manager of the project left the company. So the owner said, "Well, you're in charge now." So, whoa, okay. So that was a fantastic opportunity. I did very well, and I really had a great mentor, a man named Jerry French. He was the project manager of the company, and typically it would have fallen to him to be in charge of this project, but he actually mentored me to give me the chance. He was a Jehovah's Witness, and we learned early on we didn't really need to talk about our religions to each other. We needed to just understand that we each had a strong faith, and that was good, and so we just lived it and worked together and lived. And I learned project management from him on that job. It was a fast-track 3-month project when it actually came to be built, and it was highly successful, and I learned that's where I really got my construction management experience. So when I moved back, I became project manager for the renovation of the Palo Alto apartment complex. It was basically at the time that property was purchased, that I came back from the East and was given that opportunity through the Builders Guild to be the project manager. I actually had a few months where I would spend a week in Palo Alto and a week in Washington, D.C., and back and forth for a few weeks to make the transition. And that's where I met my lovely wife. She was one of the investors in the property and one of the team that helped manifest that property and community, which is still thriving there in one way or another. And so I worked with the Guild for many years, and Michael Gornick was the lead founder of that, and he was moving on to be the village manager at that time. And so I was elected as the president of it and went through some difficult financial times that was actually another time that Master spoke to me. We met, we had completed quite a few projects for Christmas, and then there was no jobs for January. So we didn't really realize until, the end of January that we were in trouble because there was no income and the overhead was pretty high, having an office to manage all of that. So we were quite a bit in debt, and we had a meeting of a few of the members that, what do we do? Do we divide up the debt and everybody pay up a share? Do we try to, what do we do? And when everyone left, I was sitting in front of my fireplace in the living room just praying, and I could hear Master say, take responsibility, which I did, and a number of others. But many of the people just moved on to find other work, and we sort of struggled for a few years, and then we found some better, more profitable work in Sacramento, and so we were actually able to completely pay off all back debt without any legal bankruptcy or any filing. We just honestly told each vendor, look, we'll pay you every month. A proportion of everything we make will go to everyone we owe money to. You'll get your proportionate share, which we did, and we paid everybody off. Everyone, there was one company that insisted they wanted the full amount right away, or they would take legal proceedings. Everyone else accepted that, and for many years there was quite a reputation of honesty and known for being good for the money. And then as that dwindled down, I with J.T. Heater Panduranga, we began Ananda Design and Construction, and did that for many years. Built many of the projects at the village and in other places as well, and that did quite well. And then as our son was growing older, my wife Nishla can tell you more about the college, but she thought that would be good. There was some brainstorming meetings with Ananda in different places at the village, at the Sacramento community. Different groups gathered to brainstorm ideas of creative ideas we could do to spread the teachings. And starting a college was one of those, and that was really picked up by Nishla and joined by myself. And when that really got in full swing, I withdrew from the construction to devote full time to that work.
Wow. What did Swami say, if anything, about the college or visions of that?
Swami was all for it. He was very supportive. He had always envisioned what he called the Ananda Institute of Cooperative Living. I think Master had talked about having a yoga university at Mount Washington, and so that was on one of the list of things. Swami was so creative and so many things, seeds of so many things. So he said, I'm all for it. And he actually came up with the name, the first name, which was Ananda Institute of Alternative Living. And we met with Swami in Assisi. There was a Mahasamadhi event. He was living there at the time. And we wanted to have a meeting with him to get his blessing. And picking a name, that's always the hard thing. So we were, that was sort of the one thing we hadn't really stuck with, but he helped come up with that name and gave us the blessing. We used to go to Assisi every year when they had a Mahasamadhi conference, Mahasamadhi of Yogananda. And that was quite a time. There was probably half a dozen years that was a regular thing. Then Swami moved to India, and we went to several. We took the college group to several of those, in which he continued to do in Gurgaon when he was establishing that there. Yeah.
I think of the Temple of Light, and it's just so gorgeous. Do you want to share anything about that?
Really, that was the highest honor that to be the project manager for that project. And just a couple of thoughts. I always felt and spoke that we weren't building it. That it was already existing in the causal plane, and that we were just going up through the astral plane to get it and bring it down and plant it on the earth. And it really felt like that. It was quite amazing. One of the inspiring aspects of it was so many of the builders that worked. We endeavored to have every builder that was part of Ananda to participate. We had a couple of work days, one large one for framing, one large one for landscaping and finishing up. But we had most of the long-term builders had their son or a few daughters were on the crew or came to the work days. We had Jaya Betts working with his namesake Jaya Halim side by side, working on the roof of the dome of the temple. We had, my son Rama, Vajra's son Elijah, Lucian's daughter Rachel, Diva's daughter Kashama, yeah. Sorry, Kashama. And many, many others. Michael Gornick came with his son, and so many people. That was very meaningful to me to have the intergenerational group there working together, and it was quite a push. It was pretty challenging, but it actually went pretty smoothly, really. And I just remember after one of the earlier Sunday services in the temple when it was functioning, after the grand opening, we got the final occupancy permit at 9:30 in the morning, the Friday before the 50th anniversary dedication started that evening. And so that was a miracle and a blessing from the gurus that happened. But Nishla and I were blessers with Jatish and Devi at one service after that, and Devi just said, "Oh, it's so nice that you could have, worked on helping build the temple. It's so wonderful." And my response was just, I've built a lot of buildings, and almost every building, I look at it and I say, "Yeah, I built that. That's my building." But the temple, zero. I don't have any feeling like that at all. The temple to me feels the same it does to you. This is the temple that's been given to us by Master. I feel like it's a gift from Master, not something that I did. And I really endeavored, with greater or lesser success, but I endeavored totally to have all-inclusiveness, that everyone, this is not the builders, this is not the contractor guys, this is us. This is all of Ananda, all of the work, all of the world, and the dedication ceremony with all the different religions. the rabbis and different priests of different faiths that all came to bless the temple with us was just, and each of those was someone dedicated in that faith that had the same belief that we do, that all truths are universally rooted.